Hey, how you doing? Hey, hey, hey. It's Brainsmasher. Hey. How you doing? Got another video today. Yeah, videos these days are kind of hard to come by. Free time lately been kind of hard to come by. This is my lack of content is by no means intentional. I don't know, been at the gym quite a bit lately. Been out mushroom hunting again. But yeah, so if you're not interested in death metal from the early 90s, this video might bore you to tears. And I don't know, I think 2 years ago me would have been completely bored by this video. So that's just how much I've been listening to stuff that I wasn't formerly a fan of. This stuff is kind of new to me. But so yeah, let's get into it. This is just recent pickups for the most part. Yeah, I think I've got all this stuff recently, except for this, which is what we're listening to. Morepeace descends with the Ritual of Infinity, with the Atrocity EP as a bonus. The original 92 JL America version of this is pretty hard to come by. So Extreme Music, who are always on your side, reissued this in 2005. Definitely one of those labels. I've really been gaining a better appreciation for labels who are pulling the stuff from back in the library and making it available again. The thing is, like Extreme Music in particular, their stuff, they were doing this maybe 10, 12 years ago or so. Their stuff is also like expensive and rare. Just like the stuff, the original versions of what they're reissuing. So, kind of fucking sucks. But the shit is pummeling. Great stuff from New Jersey. These guys really cut their teeth right alongside Incantation from New Jersey back in the day. They just didn't really remain as prolific as Incantation were. I never have been that big of an Incantation fan, and I think right now is probably the time when I need to start picking up more of their stuff. All I have is Onward to Golgotha and Forsaken Mourning of Angelic Anguish. I think I'm going to pick up Mortal Throne of the Nazarene and start working through their discography. But in the meantime, I've got a lot of great stuff to enjoy. So, you remember a couple videos ago, my death metal haul? More of that stuff has come into my possession, and a lot of it is fucking awesome, and here we go. Finishing out my Demolition Hammer collection. Man, Epidemic of Violence, their best record. It's just such a fucking neck breaker, man. This wasn't cheap, but this thing is in such beautiful, pristine condition. I had to pay I think it was $40 or so for it. Actually, they were having a sale at half price books, so I paid whatever 20% off of that is. Just lyrics in here, not much to look at, but yeah, this has been playing in the car quite a bit. It's one of those albums you put on and roll the windows down and you turn it up to 12 or 20 or 30, whatever your car goes up to. But you know, I don't need to spend so much time on this. You all know Demolition Hammer. Are they active again? I know they played MDF a couple of years ago. Whatever. So I picked up Bitterness from Desultory a couple of weeks ago, and it was pretty good. I liked it, and I thought it was their debut, but I was incorrect. Into Eternity is their debut, and I'm really glad that I figured that out, because this record fucking blew me away. Listened to it nonstop, probably a week straight. So this is the debut from '93. Kind of late for a debut of a Swedish death metal band, and I don't know, these guys they never really quite, I think, fit into a pigeonhole of a lot of other kind of Swedish subgenres in a way, and they changed a little bit over time, but right here is where it's at with Into Eternity, man. It was recorded in Sunlight Studios, so it sounds fucking great by Thomas Skogsberg, but it definitely does show some early foreshadowing of that melodicism that Gothenburg would really start to blow up with, but it also has its feet firmly planted in just the brutality and stuff like Nihilist and Carnage were playing back around that time. But the thing I think that grabbed me about this, and I really know, I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't expect to find myself so receptive, I guess, to just the emotional content of these records. These riffs have this building up kind of ebb and flow and explosion kind of stuff that you find with a lot of, I think, modern post black metal bands, or just maybe just a lot of modern bands who are kind of a lot more adept at portraying that kind of emotional ebb and flow like you do in more modern music. And I don't think it's, I think it's just like the mere chance that I'm finding that comparison to be pretty apt. But this record is a timeless classic, and even though I think a lot of people know Desultory, it can't be overstated how good that shit is. Another pickup was this Accidental Suicide with Deceased. This is fucking awesome, and I think really the biggest thing that it suffers from is this album cover. I mean, yeah, there's no way around it. It's really, really bad. The artwork was done by the dude who did the cover for Baphomet's Dead Shall Inherit. Grindcore Records put this out in '92. And this is helping me close in on my Grindcore Records collection. I really love this band photo. You can't really get much better than that. How about that? Friends. I don't know what it was. I could have swore that I had a copy of this, and maybe I did in my collection many years ago, and maybe I chalked it thinking, who knows. But it's back, and I really, really was impressed with how not cheesy it was. You would look at this and think, okay, I'm charmed, I'll get it, or whatever, if it wasn't, you know, $40 that you're going to pay for that if you pick it up these days. But I don't know, it's pretty good. I was surprised by how kind of slower and doomy it is. But it almost seems like that wasn't really their intent. It doesn't seem like, you know, let's take a Candlemass riff and make it a death metal riff or something like that. It just seems like their intent was like, we want to stand away from the pack and be a little different and slow it down. And it just kind of incidentally, in a way, sounds kind of doomy. So it's not all that wholly original. They're from Milwaukee, and it sounds like it, you know. It sounds like one of those Midwest death metal bands that were kind of cheesy for their time, but it holds its value the further we get away from this time period. So that's Deceased from Accidental Suicide. Also, the band name, I guess, is pretty fucking wretched. Vic Records, another label who are reissuing a lot of great stuff lately, put out this band's previously unreleased, I think, EP, along with a couple other things. So that might be something you could pick up. But this is going to remain a rarity, I think, for quite a while. Not a lot of people know about that. Also picked up, gosh, now that I think about it, I can't remember if I talked about these two in my previous video or not, so I won't spend a lot of time with them. Actually, I think I might have, but I hadn't listened to them at that time. But now that I have, holy shit. Sacrifice is fucking great. They're known a lot more for their debut, which came out in '85, and the one that came after that, I think it was more like '90, if I'm not mistaken. I can't recall the titles of those, because I'm kind of new to this band, honestly. So this is their, let's see, third and fourth full-length, 91 and 93, and these are fucking killer thrash metal records, where a lot of bands at this time, 91 to 93 or so, were kind of trying to distance themselves from thrash, be a lot more brutal, and walk towards the death metal shrine. These guys were still playing thrash, and they got better at playing thrash into the mid-90s. I don't know what happened after this period with them. I haven't heard it, but these are fucking great. It's just really indicative of a band that stuck to their roots, and kept getting better. I'm not too familiar with their debut or the second one either, so it's kind of hard for me to use those to compare to, but these are so damn good. I found myself liking Apocalypse Inside a little bit more, so I'll put a link to both of them. I'll put a link to all this stuff down below, but Soldiers of Misfortune is another one. Both of these came out on Metal Blade Records. And so yesterday, I just kind of felt like going down to the local record store and seeing what they had. And they had nothing. Nothing for me anyways. Wound up getting nothing. It's kind of weird that when I walk out of a record store with nothing in my hands. But so as a consolation, I decided to stop by the pawn shop just for the hell of it. Every once in a while there's some kind of weird metal thing. You know, these days at a pawn shop the CD selection is dwindling. So they have just like a couple of racks. They probably had like 50 CDs for sale, and they're all 50 cents. But I thought every once in a while I have this weird run-in where I find something that I like. And that happened yesterday after I left the record store empty-handed. Picked up Edge of Sanity's Crimson for $50. You know, this album isn't mind-blowing or amazing or anything, but I've seriously wanted to get a copy of this for a really long time. When I was first getting into metal, driving around in the car listening to records with my buddy Kelly, this was one of them that he played very, very often. And I don't know, I was always interested in it, but I always kind of like kept it at arm's length so that when I did get a copy of it, it would feel a little bit more new and refreshing. So that day has come, and I listened to this about 3 times since I got it yesterday. It's really, really great. It's a one-track, 40-minute long album, and I think this is kind of an oddity in their discography, or maybe kind of the first step away from their death metal roots, because it's written, I think, I could have swore that this was like just kind of an experiment where Don Spagna wrote most of the material, but it actually says the music was by Edge of Sanity, so I've never really understood how much of Edge of Sanity's music was like just Don Spagna or the whole band. I'm saying Don Spagna, the Swedish version of Dan Swano. So also picked up, dude, Atrocity, Hallucinations, 1990, their debut. Oh, this is fucking good. So a couple of months ago, my buddy Tanner was talking about this album, and I realized, I don't know, I wasn't sure if I had heard it or not. I want to say I actually had this on cassette pretty recently, and I sold all my cassettes, most of my cassettes. All I have left right there, and I'm not getting rid of those, but I had a bunch of like old death metal stuff that I maybe kind of regret selling, but I needed the money, and I got $150 out of my tapes, and that was pretty good. You'll have to pardon my runny fucking nose. I feel like a 5-year-old sitting here talking about death metal. But this is so killer. These guys wound up being kind of like a gothy, kind of techno, kind of death metal band. Just fucking awful. I don't understand who in Europe is letting bands get away with that kind of shit, but this is recorded by Scott Burns. This is just a very, very early example of death metal, and it's just fucking ferocious. There's lots of similarities to like, I think Death's Leprosy is a pretty close comparison here. Band photos. So yeah, you'll hear a lot of stuff like what Death was doing around this time too, and we'll get into their second album here in a minute too. But this is just fucking ferocious and violent, but also has a lot of the chunkiness and just brutality that death metal was doing at this time. It's fucking primitive, but it's also kind of forward-thinking. And speaking of forward-thinking, this is their second album, which in German, there's a German version of this and an English version of this. The German is Todessehnsucht, which means longing for death. I feel like a lot more people should know about this record, but given that they lost the logo and this album cover is fucking completely forgettable, this album kind of goes unfairly unknown. But you can tell that right away, Atrocity, I think, were moving away from their roots. And in fact, before Hallucinations, they were like a political grindcore band, just like 2 years before this one came out. So like every single album, especially after this one, they just changed. They tried to reinvent themselves and shed their skin a lot. And so this one isn't a whole lot different than the debut, but you can really see how they're just like really trying to strip free from the shackles of the death metal template, I guess. But this is also really vicious. But I think where Hallucinations, the riffing is just kind of like straightforward, kind of chunky stuff. This has a lot more disharmony and dissonant kind of riffs going on, kind of crazy tempos, and they incorporate synthesizer in this. Not in a cheesy way at all. It's just kind of like this more of an added element of noise in a way, rather than like harmonical kind of synth or orchestral kind of stuff. It's a really unique listen, and they end the album with a cover of a death song, Archangel. So yeah, happy to pick that up as well. After this, I read a couple reviews of the albums that came out after this, and they're just hilarious. This band just apparently completely shit the bed after Longing for Death. So the last album we'll talk about is not really along the lines, I guess, of the rest of this. It's not as brutal as these, but this is a band called Sadness. And in the VC, I've only seen one other person talk about this record, Michael Laura, who is sadly missed. I hope you're watching. Hope you come back to making videos, Mike. But so Sadness did this debut album, Ames de Marbre, probably mispronouncing that, back in '93. And this, as far as I know, my experience is the earliest example, I guess, of a death metal band who were kind of moving into a more doomy direction, were really coming up with some more vampiric and gothic kind of influences. So this is a really wholly unique kind of thing. It's not that overbearing or like distasteful of incorporation by any means. It's a super great album. Just a weird album cover, and I'm sure that does it a lot of hurt in the, as far as people knowing what it is. This again is a Vic Records reissue, and it has 2 demos tacked on to the end of it. It's kind of a short album, it's 7 tracks, but the songs are kind of long, but really good stuff. It's not one of those, it's not chunky like this, it's not super guttural by any means. It's just really well written. They use a lot of kind of sour notes in ways, and it's just a really original kind of thing. The demos aren't all that great. A couple of the songs from the demos are on the full length, so you're not really gaining a whole lot there. It's just kind of some nasty, rough around the edges kind of shit. But Sadness is a really underappreciated, sadly underappreciated band. So that's it for right now. Thanks for joining me, and we'll see you next time.